Okay, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over our week 2 match against Steve Chuck and his Waterdeep Wobbuffets. Please go check out that video first if you've not done so already, as we went over the Teambuilder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant dropped a heartbreaker 1-0 after a Thunderbolt paralysis on the penultimate turn allowed him to outspeed and get the win. That dropped our record to 1-1 with a +2 differential, leading into the showdown with Sazbo and his Boulder Boldores. Timestamps are in the description. Joe is one of my very best friends outside of draft. He was my confidant in testing out teams and ideas from Gen 4 Battle Tower back in the day to Wooper Club League activities before he joined himself in Season 7. He did make the playoffs in that gym leader season, then after a disappointing Season 8 took a couple seasons off to finish up his college program. Congrats to Dr. Sazbo. Now after somehow avoiding playing each other in Season 7 and 8, we finally meet up as fellow 1-1 teams that generally know each other's playstyles and team building quite well. So let's see what we can cook up. His team is pretty spooky, starting at the top with Hawlucha, Heliolisk, Blacephalon, Liepard, Cryogonal, Excadrill, Rillaboom, and Tapu Fini, which both support the Hawlucha, Drifbloom, Diancie, and Hippowdon. Obvious terrain core with Blacephalon to make a Firewater Grass core, Hawlucha and Drifbloom to take advantage of them, 2 spinners to remove hazards but not the terrain, one of which takes advantage of Sand from Hippo, new acquisition Diancie for support, bulk, and power, plus Heliolisk for fast pivoting. Lots of versatility, very on brand for Sazbo. We'll start by ignoring Drifbloom, though it's not exactly something I'm worried about because I still don't really know what it's supposed to do. Will-O-Wisp and Strength Sap is kind of funny, I guess, but in a terrain team with Unburden, I'm not sure what that's supposed to translate to. Taunt stops it pretty hard in its tracks. I guess it could come and I could be unprepared for it, but my hopes aren't exactly high. Same with Liepard, I've definitely got more respect for the cat after last season, seeing how it can prankster T-Wave and set up various things like weather conditions while spamming U-turn and knockoff. But as long as I can identify what it's trying to set up for, I'm not overly concerned. Potentially something like a Sunny Day set for Blacephalon, but even then, maybe this is strange, but I'm going to claim Hippowdon as not very good in the matchup. He brought a cool, specially offensive Hippo week 2, but what's it going to be doing to something like my Bronzong, or Torn, or truthfully Kartana? If you struggle to break through Cart while being weak to Leaf Blade, or need special coverage to hit already good matchup mons like Bronzong or Torn, plus my team has about as many Sandstorm immunities as you're going to have a bad time. I'll say about the same for Diancie. Rock isn't the worst, and it does at least have stabs for Torn and Hydreigon, and a pretty good Arcanine matchup, but it's another liability to Kartana and Swampert and Nidoking among others. Nidoqueen, rather. It can be a little scarier than Hippo also in that it can set up. Something like Trick Room, though, or Weakness Policy potentially, plus a Diamond Storm to boost defenses, that's actually a little bit spooky. Finally, I'm going to go with a weird pick in Rillaboom, though it is actually a pretty decent Cart check with superpower. Grassy terrain doesn't do him any favors in stopping Cart otherwise, which is already really scary for him in the matchup, not to mention the way that my ground types don't really care about the terrain, and in fact take advantage of it to regain some health. He has other mons that can hit Swampert super effectively, and that Grassy Glide doesn't actually do much for him in the matchup otherwise, as everything on my team that's at least speed tied with him already resists Grassy Glide. Well-timed knockoffs and U-turns could be annoying, along with the damage, or even a resisted Wood Hammer. This may not be the matchup for it. Cryogonal is something that can hit Swampert 4 times super effectively. Don't forget week 1 with how tough it is for the squad to face Freeze Dry. It's got a lot of speed too, notably outpacing Hydreigon, and it can take a lot of special hits surprisingly, meaning it can survive a Torn hit and fire back with those nasty ice moves, and provide support with something like Screens and or Rapid Spin just enough and favored enough by Sazbo to probably come. Excadrill is not something he's favored, but it's at least decent here. Mold Breaker ground move is pretty nice for Bronzong. I could see something like an AV with stabs plus rock and rapid spin, or something like a bulky defensive toxic set, or maybe rapid spin to boost speed with sword stance to go for a mini sweep like a breaker. I don't have the best of resists to it, so we may have to get a little bit creative. Heliolisk is the most awkward one on the team for sure. The coverage is great and hits on the special side, but it relies on the inaccurate Focus Blast to hit either Hydreigon or Kartana, the latter of which is also a speed tie. He absolutely cannot be locked into a bad move thanks to my great resists, but he really needs Surf and Grass Knot for Nidoqueen and Swampert respectively. Maybe if I get him locked into a bad move of a choice item, we take advantage of it, but otherwise that speed and coverage could actually be a problem. His big 3 I'm worried about starts with Blacephalon. Even if I have a Hydreigon, those stabs hit so stinking hard, I'm beginning to see why people panic and prep against my Ultra Beast. If it can grab a KO against something weak or fragile, that could just be game over. I'm definitely worried about Scarf, but maybe more so by something like a substitute set and or a flame charge set that could put him in an even better position to sweep at the end, especially with potentially weird coverage moves like Psychic or Solar Beam. Speaking of, Hawlucha is looking more and more problematic as I get closer to the match. The Terrain Seed could be physical or special, meaning he can easily grab a boost to either defensive stat, and Unburden means he can fully invest in HP and attack to run Adamant and avoid OHKOs, maybe even 2 KOs, and threaten all of my biggest potential offensive threats really easily. Maybe I have to sacrifice something significant to Blasef or Drill. That could be all he needs to sweep with Hawlucha. Finally, the one I expect to come with the Luchador Tapu Fini has stabs that are impossible to deal with. Arcanine and Nidoqueen are my sturdy fairy resist, and they both crumble to Hydro Pump, and my Kartana and Hydreigon that are water are especially fragile and incredibly frail to Fairy, in particular with the Hydreigon. And it may take a Scarf, but it could also be set up with Iron Defense to help live a card hit, and Draining Kiss with a Calm Mind to stall me out. Finally, that Misty Terrain not only weakens my Dragon moves with Hydreigon I've been attempting to spam in addition to stopping the spread of Toxic, which I also tend to favor and heavily utilized in Week 1. So with all that said, for me, Pinsir struggles again. It's a tier 20, but worth acknowledging a bit for its base 85 speed, something that he meets or eclipses with a majority of his team. Despite the Rillaboom matchup, Hawlucha and Blacephalon easily stand out against it, not to mention things like Hippo or Drifblim or Diancie that could still come and just ruin its day. Jolteon may look okay at first, outspeeding his whole team and hitting especially Hawlucha and Fini with strong electric stab, but it gives Drill a free switch in, is susceptible to his own scarfs, and won't be outspeeding Hawlucha when it comes out with the help of a Terrain Seed, so it'll have to sit the bench. Slurpuff seemed kinda cute actually. Misty Explosion and Misty Terrain is strong, but if it doesn't even OHKO Heliolisk with Magic's special attack investment, there's a problem. My Unburden is surpassed by Hawlucha too. He has two very viable spinners for webs, plus multiple mons off the ground that I would love to be the one to have slowed down in the first place, and a Calm Mindset would give him all the time in the world to set up, not to mention all those sets crumble to Grassy Glide. I thought Bronzong was going to come for sure, but considering its issues against his best team members, I'm going to pass. No Flying Resist Sprott is very tough, but Hawlucha can KO relatively easily with the fighting coverage it has anyways, and Psychic doesn't even OHKO even without the Spidef Seed in return. I don't like being a liability against Fini too, though I considered something like Trick with a hindering item to ruin it a little bit. Blacephalon is the most free mon in the game against Bronzong. Despite the possibility of something like Rock Tomb or Bulldoze to hinder it, I don't want it freely spamming anything. Add in Heliolisk freely clicking moves unless I have Body Press, Rillaboom clicking knockoff freely unless I have Colbur or a way to hit it, even Hippo who can't touch me that well can set up rocks and force me to defog because he has rapid spinners. Bronzong is just a little too passive for the matchup I'm looking at. Finally, I actually made a last-minute change to the team. Our magic got delayed today, and even then, about an hour before the match, I had a weird Hydreigon set with Taunt and Hydro Pump, but ended up not bringing it for the first time this season. I did not like how susceptible it felt to Fini and Hawlucha, among others, especially because I wanted its team slot to be filled with something else that can handle Fini. Compared to, spoiler alert, the Mantine I went with, it was weak to Fairy, still weak to Freeze Dry, and still gets OHKO'd by Hawlucha but without setup, in exchange for a slightly better Rillaboom matchup and a Heliolisk counter aside from the likely Focus Blast. Mantine offered something else that I liked more, so I benched one of my top tiers for the first time all season. Going with a bunch of high tiers again, minus the Hydreigon. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure, but for now, we just need to get above the 500 mark. That means we've got a supportive Tornadus set again with Taunt to stop terrains, hazards, and potential setup all in one. We also, of course, have Knockoff. It comes close to the OHKO on Blacephalon, and Hurricane hits the Rillaboom extremely hard, and more importantly, the Hawlucha as well. Finally, I really like the idea of spamming Knockoff on this. The follow-up to a couple of his answers would be Fire Coverage and Heat Wave, sporting the ability to do over half to Drill, and follow up on Knockoff to KO Heliolisk thanks to the Dry Skin. We also got Speed for that Heliolisk, though of course it is risky to stay in as it's 2 for 2 so far this season on Choice Scarf, with the rest in HP and some defense investment to support that Rocky helmet we've got. Yeah, it doesn't have that many physical attackers to make contact, but it makes us a better Rillaboom check, allows us to actually check Fini a little bit better if it has Draining Kiss, and most importantly with proper maneuvering, we can get somewhere around 33% chip onto Hawlucha, even if it's set up, which is a big problem for everything on my team. A Flying type is a great answer to many of his big threats too, but I don't think he has anything bigger and better than Kartana is for him, especially with a Scarf. This also lets us outspeed literally his whole team, aside from of course the Hawlucha who can double again, or Heliolisk who could tie me, and potentially the Trick Room Diancie. We get the jump on everything else though, and the Calcs for Leaf Blade are pretty disgusting. If we get a boost, Blacephalon is threatened by the OHKO alongside Max HP Excadrill and fully defensive Fini, Diancie, and Hippowdon, plus Heliolisk, Liepard, and Crocodile who are just straight OHKO'd otherwise. For those counting, that is almost everything on his entire team. Drifblim resists, but is a Drifblim. Rillaboom resists, but more importantly powers up that very Leaf Blade, and the bane of everything Hawlucha, which is just a problem no matter what. But even then, we can get the super effective Psycho Cut, and we're still in business. Add in the generally spammable Knockoff, plus Smart Strike for more general use, and you've got yourself a machine. Kurt has been generally underwhelming so far, forcing Mons to stay in Game 1 and in Game 2 sacrificing itself for chip into Hexorus, but this is the week I'm leaning into this being my best win con, so as long as I can avoid the Hawlucha win con for him, we can get this to work. We now get to move on to the 120s, where we're going to find a just better Hawlucha answer. The Swampert survives anything from Hawlucha at +2 even after rocks, and then I'm going to let loose a Mighty Roar to stop the cumulative boosts. While Torn may be a way to stop it a little bit once already boosted, so long as I incentivize him to stop at one Swords Dance, Swampert will roar it out, negating the Swords Dance boost, the Seed boost, and the Unburdened Speed boost all at once. That would probably be game winning in and of itself, as then Kartana can outspeed it, it would need to set up Swords Dance again, and also wouldn't have the defense boost as I try to break through it. I could also roar out a Feeny or Diancie that's starting to set up, and Iron Defense before Kartana comes in is a little frightening. So actually a lot of cool utility with this move here. He may even be tempted to set up in front of Swampert, in which case this mon just puts in a ton of work against his whole team, minus the Rillaboom, Freeze Dry Cryo, and the Grass Knot plus Dry Skin Heliolisk. It's genuinely a great matchup, but it needs to stay in the back specifically for that Hawlucha. If we can beat it out early, though, we can take advantage of the Swampert the rest of the match. Flip Turn, for example, goes off on him aside from, as I said, the Dry Skin and High Horsepower hits a fair amount of his team hard consistently in the terrain, especially if we can predict that Heliolisk switch in, or to threaten the Excadrill or Diancie a little bit harder. Finally, I did think a lot about the last move, but I settled with Protect. It seems like a good way to get some more HP back with lefties, maybe run out of terrain, maybe scout a Choice Lock move from something like Heliolisk, generally solid. Next, we've got this Arcanine, and this time we're combining a defensive profile with an offensive one with Intimidate, finally. That should provide at least an okay check to Hawlucha in a pinch, as should Extreme Speed, which does over a third if he hasn't raised his defense stat. Wild Charge could do even more if I'm somehow able to bring it in against Hawlucha in neutral, while also, of course, nailing that Feeny at least a little bit. Flare Blitz is the generally spammable move, but even though it do KOs Bouffalant, it does have a lot of recoil, so we'll kind of see how we want to maneuver that. Again, the last move was very tricky here, but I actually like the Teleport quite a bit as a slow pivot into Kartana, especially considering I'm foregoing U-turn on Torn and Hydreigon, especially if I know Kart can get the Ocon whenever I swap out into. That's partially why I've got the Pasho Berry as well. I can take the hit more effectively, then pivot out for the immediate offensive threat pretty nicely, or stay and get 2 Wild Charges off on something because I can tank hit, or even confidently stay in on something like Heliolisk Surf to KO it back with Flare Blitz, otherwise taking something like a Water move from the Feeny. This is my only real Cryogonal check though too, so at least Kart does outspeed even after a spin, but that means that Intimidate can be important as well, so the rolls for a lot of these mons are very much dependent on what exactly he brings. And then we are running it back with the AV on Nidoqueen this week next. This season has been so high-powered, I like the extra bulk provided by the AV, and it fits really well, and I've got 4 attacks I want to run. Stabs plus Ice Beam for things like Hippo and Hawlucha are very easy, but Sucker Punch is actually kind of neat too. I can run Quiet Nature relatively easily since there's nothing I want to invest speed for, except maybe fully bulky Feeny, meaning Sucker Punch can have a surprise KO on 2 Bouffalant, in addition to taking a hit from it or anything else aside from maybe the drill. Simple and straightforward, and it's a good description for the last minute edition of Mantine as well. There are about 6 or 7 moves I would have really liked to put on here, but these will definitely work in a pinch. For example, Air Slash would have been nice for Rillaboom, but I think I've got a lot of great answers to that anyways, plus a Scald Burn is potentially likely when it has to be in grassy terrain and not misty terrain. Additionally, I wanted this to be a great Feeny answer first and foremost, and even at +2, Moonblast isn't even too a KOing. But what do I do back without Haze? I retain the defog idea I had with my Hydreigon set, meaning the purpose is to defog the terrain away every time I come in to limit Hawlucha switch-in opportunities, and Toxic is the follow-up because it allows me to actually beat the Feeny 1v1. Defog rids Feeny of the status protection and lowers its evasion in one fell swoop, allowing me to lay down the Toxic to put it on a timer while tanking anything it can do if it's set up. Trick would be very painful, so we will need to scout that first though. Roost for longevity, of course, Boots because when it comes in it needs to be healthy, and Max Phys Def because on the special side we already tank what we do and don't what we don't, so the extra bulk on the physical side could be useful. That's the team, we've got our game plan, now it's time to execute. This is the most strong I've been so far. No Heliolisk, Excadrill, or Cryogonal, and not even the Diancie I was starting to worry about as we got closer to the match. He did bring the Rillaboom instead, plus Hippo surprisingly, and maybe even more surprising is the Liepard. No Helio or Cryo looks great for Mantine. No Cryo takes pressure off Arcanine. No Drill takes pressure off of Arcanine. The Liepard looks annoying for my plain speediness thanks to Prankster T-Wave, and unfortunately with 2 trains, I cannot predict the seed on Hawlucha. Well, I still like Torn's overall utility, especially with the ability to taunt the Hippo setting up rocks, so that's what I am going to lead with. Good luck, have fun to Sazbo. And he actually ends up leading with the Feeny, which seems like a relatively even matchup to me. Trick sure would suck, but I think I really need to find out what that item is in the first place. I need to knock this thing probably more than anything else on his team, so I'm going to take the opportunity to do so. We go first, Knock doesn't do much lefties, and the Scald right back is going to do about 30%. I think that's consistent with max HP, max defense, maybe a little bit of special attack investment, or just another max roll because we've gotten used to that by this point. That heavily implies to me that it's a setup set with Calm Mind. which is pretty scary, and we're also risking the burn by staying in any longer. Let's go straight into our Feeny check now that we are a little bit safer to handle this a little better and get that health back from Regenerator. Swap into the Mantine, but he has the same idea with the swap into Rillaboom, changing the terrain again. That is just not a good matchup for me, but I suppose the switch was pretty obvious. What do I have for Rillaboom? Arcanine is more expendable, but I bet I could save it. I don't like its Hippo matchup at all either, though. You know what? Let's just pivot back into Torn. That seems pretty safe. And Swords Dance, Rillaboom. Both terrain setters are set up. Then you already know that he's going to have to swap out there as I'm a little slow on the button. Luckily, I have Hurricane. I know he's going to chunk me with whatever he wants to hit me with, but of course I outspeed, so we're going to fire the Hurricane, which could just KO, but instead we see he hard switches into the Hippo for the Sandstorm, and even though Hurricane's accuracy isn't lower than Sandstorm, I miss. Maybe more importantly, though, that's a Grassy Seed on Hippo. That's kind of weird, but that's also the third setup Mon confirmed, plus probably Hawlucha. What's it setting up for? No matter, we can stop whatever it's trying to do in its tracks with Taunt, whether it's Rocks, Slack Off, or potentially even Stockpile. That's interesting. Oh, you wouldn't do that to me, would you? Oh, I don't know what he has to hit me with. Rock Slide is the worst case scenario. I'm going to guess he switches this time, and I'm just going to click Knock Off to try and hit something else that may swap in. That seems like a decent idea, I suppose, but of course he doesn't switch, and with no item and +1 defense it does nothing. Body Press is his move of choice, and we're doing about as much back in Helmet Recoil as he does to me with the +1 move. If Slack Off is on there too, that would make sense, as I have no Body Press immunities. I'm going to guess that's the set, maybe? And now the plan is just stay in and chip it down until I need to taunt again, so I think I'm just going to Hurricane away. Of course, though, Feeny is back in, setting up that terrain, as Hurricane does decent chip. We got down to about 2/3 or so. 29% is not bad. I'm actually a little bit below that myself, especially after just a moment here with the Sandstorm chip. So we know that we're going to try and get that Regenerator up a little bit, potentially here too. So now that I know that it isn't Trick, it's probably time to execute the Mantine Initiative. You like that name? Anyways, we're going to swap into Mantine, and what we can already guess is just going to be a Calm Mind. That makes sense, trying to take advantage of Torrent's special moveset. He may be feeling comfortable in front of me, but I mentioned the Teambuilder. This is what this was for. Calm Mind again, defog away the terrain. Probably like, what? Calm Mind a third time and lay down the unmissable Toxic thanks to the lowered evasion. Easy. Now, we do have it on a timer. I can't imagine it's going to do too much to me, but this was, of course, still a bit of a misplay. I really should just be clicking the Safe Roost to gauge its damage. What's it going to do? Keep boosting up and eventually do, I don't know, not that much more, honestly. I am very specially defensive. But instead, I just kind of click Scald to see what it would actually do, maybe catch a switch. Instead, Moonblast does so much damage to me, that's not going to fly. That's a 2-hit KO, even if it took 3 turns of setup to make it there. So I considered my options here. I think he's got to go for one of his stab moves. He can't be setting up anymore, not with Toxic, ticking him down a little bit. I could try to stay in, try and outpredict him going for the water move on a Nidoqueen or Arcanine switch in. Actually, Nidoqueen does have AV, but more importantly, Arcanine has that Pasho Berry too. That's not going to be for Heliolisk. Feeny's low already. Can we roost up with Mantine later? Absolutely. I think that Hippo seems to be a prime candidate for that if needed. It's settled. We'll go Arcanine, who my calcs are showing should survive a +3 Scald at almost a quarter, and a +3 Moonblast, which he does click, and only does about half. Thanks to the Toxic chip, we've got it down quite low, so it's the moment of truth. He decides to let the Feeny go down. He does not need this to activate the Misty Seed on Hawlucha. We clicked Wild Charge because we needed actually Wild Charge to ensure that it KOs a max HP, max defense variant here. So we do actually get this, and it is 6-5. Hawlucha has to be another Grassy Seed alongside the Hippo, which doesn't have its item anymore. We've got Mantine and Arcanine at half each. He has Hippo itemless, no hazards are up, and Feeny is down. His response to Arcanine, curiously, is Liepard. I distinctly remember thinking, what does this thing even do? My first thought is Thunder Wave, of course, and I don't actually have many switch-ins to that as I would like to. Maybe Nidoqueen would work. Swampert needs to remain healthy, of course, but I absolutely cannot let Kartana get parried, and probably not Torn either, which is something I'm going to need to think about moving forward with the team in general, actually. The Route 1 Burbs used Liepard effectively last season, and they ran a multi-weather team to great success. Maybe this could be like Sunny Day Liepard to boost the power of Lysephalon's moves. Then actually saw some curious calcs. I pulled it up to see how much Extreme Speed and Flare Blitz would do to Liepard. Note that Extreme Speed, if this doesn't have investment, actually 2 at KOs. But I saw that the default set was Choice Band. I felt, that's kind of odd, right? That's maybe not what I'm just thinking. Maybe it's not that odd. +1 knockoff actually KOs my Arcanine from this range. That's a bit concerning, as my original plan was to just click Flare Blitz, maybe Extreme Speed after, but after seeing that too, I see this could just be paired or straight KO'd by Knock. And if that's the case, maybe I could try stacking my weakest remaining Mon in Mantine? It's not that bad of an idea. He doesn't have any protection from Toxic anymore, either if it's an offensive Liepard. It's the safe middle ground play, and so we're just going to try and make that happen. And he is actually going to go for Hone Claws. Hone Claws. That's cool. That's also his 5th setup Mon, 4th confirmed. Surely Bouffalant isn't set up too. And there's not much to do here, but I guess hope for a Skull Burn or soften it up for a Cart. But of course he's just going to click Knock, which also needed +1 to be able to KO from that range. 5-5. I'm not actually in the best position here anymore. Here's hoping that Torn can help. I guess Cart could have been kind of free here too, but I was still very worried about that Thunder Wave since I don't know the rest of the set. I'm still relying on Cart to put in the work here against Hippo, Bouffalant, and others, especially if we can get a boost in there somehow. So we're going to hold off on that in favor of my super utility pivot Torn. I'm going to click Hurricane here, after which I think he should go down to Helmet Chip or a follow-up Heat Wave if needed. Or if he clicks T-Wave, I guess we'll just kind of have to hope, because I really don't want this to be paralyzed again after what happened last week, but we're going to go for it. Let's see what happens. We're going to Hurricane away. We hit it. 90% is great. Confusion even better. A +1 attack. He hits himself in Confusion as well, which is just the best case scenario. Sorry about the hacks, mate. That is a 7% chance of happening. 70% to hit, 30% chance to confuse for 21% overall, and 1 in 3 to hit self in Confusion for the 7%. That's some quick maths there. That does mean Torn gets us back into a winning position, 5-4, and what is equivalent to a crit, as his next threat is going to hop right in, and you already know it's the Bouffalant. It's aptly named. I'm not sure what the best move here is, actually. I could try and sack Arcanine to get Cart in after, but then what? Man, this Torn looks really used for Rillaboom too, but I do at least have Nidoqueen. Maybe that's the play. Maybe chip this into Sucker Punch range so I can have Nidoqueen take it out, which can beat everything he's got left at that point pretty much. Sure, let's do that. We're going to click Knockoff. It will not KO, but it will get him to range by doing 84%, and actually we'll do better than that and get the crit. He's got the Focus Sash to live on 1, but he's actually set up Bouffalant using Flame Charge Race Speed, but not only that, is a contact move, and Rocky Helmet is actually going to claim a KO 5-3. There is so much that happened that turn. That was crazy. As I said, Nako is doing 84% minimum, so even a min roll should have put it into range of the 16.66% recoil chip from Helmet. No additional hacks here. Worry not. This was not a second turn in a row where hacks mattered. Now, he knows Hippo loses to Torn. Obviously, at this point, it definitely loses to the Torn here. So he has no choice but to go for game next. We already know that's a Grassy Seed, so of course he's got to be able to proc it with the Rillaboom. I thought about going straight out into something else, forced him to waste terrain turns, but realized he's probably just going to click U-turn, and if that's the case, let's just try and get some damage on him, or punish him on a hard switch. Hurricane away. It connects, actually does 90%, and although U-turn does come out, he doesn't just slow swap, he feints the second Helmet casualty in a row, as we're up 5-2, but now we are in the most danger we have been in all match, with Hawlucha staring us down. Next, with multiple boosts up already, the Unburdened one being the Unseen. Now, I really love my Swampert plan, but there are flaws to all of our plans. A crit will KO Swampert most of the time after an SD, so if he gets to +2 this turn, what are we doing? Hoping there's not a crit? Okay, I still like our odds to not get crit, but this is really just me trying to justify what I do this turn. I know he's going to SD, so my options are as follows. Hurricane him, with a hit winning us the match, or a miss turning things sour, or we're going to Swampert. After which a crit wins him the game, and anything else wins us the game. I don't like the odds of staying in compared to switching out, but it's right there for the tanking. Hurricane with Oko, and even if it doesn't, Arcanine Extreme Speed will finish it off right here and now. Isn't that good enough? You know, whatever it is. Biggest misplay of the match is right here as I abandoned my game plan of switching into Swampert immediately. Hurricane away on the SD, and that's a miss. Now the game is much more losable. I lamented in my original calcs how hard Hawlucha hits. It cannot SD again, and if I'm him, that's probably what I'm doing. I have to click Hurricane again, and we need to connect this time. He subs. Oh no. Oh no. And we hit the Hurricane. Oh man, that is so scary. We can afford to fish for the crit now. Or he can afford to fish for it now, and if he heads to the sub up. And frankly, I'm probably still misplaying even after this by going for the safe Heat Wave. It's only 90% accurate. We break his second sub as he sees what's going to happen if he just fishes for a miss now too. It's low, but not low enough for extreme speed considering he has +1 defense. I need to just sack the Tornado Heatwave. After 2 subs, he is low enough that Heatwave either KOs or put in E-speed range. Acrobatics is out 4-2, but Hawlucha is only at +2 and at a third. Health doesn't matter too much because Swampert finally makes an appearance, and this is the real moment of truth. Luckily, we've got to this point, even if it took a little bit more than it really should have. If I get crit, I have to Intimidate cycle and hope to KO this with extreme speed, and then have Nidoqueen clutch it out against Hippo, probably. Otherwise, I think it's probably GG, and we don't even get the suspense, though, because he is just going to go for a substitute. And we have the best way to break us up by clicking Roar. That should be GG. I'm going to claim a little bit of glory for a team member that deserves to finish some things off. As I flip turn out, I'm going to go into Kartana as he reveals Toxic as his last move, actually. I flipped turn out. Since I'm Scarf and Hawlucha has no boosts at 9%, a Leaf Blade will KO Hippo, and the +1 Leaf Blade will annihilate his biggest threat, netting us the 4-0 win. Oh, GG to Sazbo, but did you have to bring 6 setup mons? That's 10 in our last 2 matches, plus a Suicide Rocker and a Screen Setter. Okay, WCL, noted. So that's the plan for the Bouffalant. Didn't work this time, but maybe we got a little lucky. We'll break it down a little bit. It's a weird Hippo set. I definitely want to start with that. Over on Sazbo's side, Toxic could rip through it. No way to touch Nidoqueen at all, potentially, or no recovery, since either EQ or Slack Off was the one that's missing. Torn was free against it, and ironically, after his week 1 rampage, we used his own medicine against him in the taunt game. Very weird, but a weird set that worked was the Liepard. Very much caught me off guard with the offensive set. If that confusion hadn't occurred, say he got to knock off the helmet, that's 2 indirect KOs he avoided. Don't know how much that changes the math. I would think it would be Bouffalant does get a hit off, and then we would have gotten to see Nidoqueen come in after the Sucker Punch, or Kartana to Leaf Blade, probably the Nidoqueen. So it could have at least affected differential in that capacity. I would think after that it would be probably Rillaboom coming in, trying to take down the Nidoqueen, or doing as much damage as it could, as I took it down with Sludge Wave. And then we could pretty much end up being in the same spot where I try to take down the Hawlucha with Ice Beams, and he eventually has to, after maybe 1 SD, maybe 0, take me out with an Acrobatics, and then Swampert comes in, roars. Pretty much the same game, except with 1 more Mon down, and Nidoqueen would have had to put in more work than the Tornadus in that case. So I don't think that mattered too terribly much. Bouffalant, cool set. I had the answers to it, luckily, with the Sucker Punch in the back, which would have been kind of neat to see. Both train setters were set up for themselves, in the case of Rillaboom for others as well. Don't know how much I like that, but I think we had at least identified that Feeny was a sick win con from the start. We kind of knew that something like Calm Mind would be coming. Rillaboom really did struggle with a couple key mons that made his inclusion suspect, but it's obviously not terrible. It's a Rillaboom, come on. And Hawlucha, man, that thing is ridiculous. Don't know if I've had the pleasure of facing this thing yet in draft, but boy was my team susceptible to it. Even max defense to my bulkiest mon wasn't enough for a lucky crit. Lucky that the Roar game plan worked out. Speaking of, on my team, Nidoqueen did nothing, but I assume a couple Ice Beams could have finished off Hippo. Probably could have tanked a hit from Hawlucha, Rillaboom, or Feeny before KOing them back. Not to mention, I considered it a potential Liepard answer. That may have actually been the smart play. Yes, I would have had to take probably the knockoff for the Assault Vest, but it would have been a little bit safer than risking something else. Luckily, though, it didn't end up mattering all that much because the Mantine just went down anyways, and we were able to take it out. Safety net in the back, no complaints. Mantine did as expected, got Feeny low, cleared out the train, and went down for a free switch against another setup threat. Arcanine did just fine too, took Feeny down to bring its KD for the season up to 4-0 actually, big shout out to that. And Extreme Speed, always so reliable in the back. Kartana cleaned up a couple KOs at the end. Don't know if it was needed, but it did force him to save a couple mons in the back for what it could have done. This probably eased the mini predictions game at least a little bit. Swampert was clutch, didn't do anything but roar and flip turn out, but he stopped the only real way I could have lost, so big props there. But seriously, Tornadus-Therian, a quarter of Feeny's health while removing lefties, taunt to stop Hippo and get a bit of recoil, 100% to Liepard, 100% to Bouffalant, 100% to Rillaboom, and even 67% to Lucha by merit of subs and helmet. Torn literally single-handedly brought down 2/3 of my opponent's team by itself, aided a bit by the Hurricane luck, as well as hindered a little bit by the Hurricane luck on Hawlucha. I finally got to prove at least a little bit why Torn deserved to be picked in the first round by me. I'm so happy I got the bird. Easy MVP. That's going to wrap it up this week, though. We're up to 2-1 with a +6 differential. That's good for a third-place tie right now out of 12 teams. We've got another opportunity to move up, though. This time it's going to be against the newcomer Wooper Troopers and their undefeated 3-0 team that just made a couple transactions. We'll go over that, plus our own transactions, in the next one. See ya.